This episode of Monty's Minute is brought to you by Netflix. For a free 30-day trial, head on over to netflix.com/GamebreakerTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Monty's Minute, episode 18 for January 29th, 2013. I'm Gary again, and you're watching Gamebreaker TV. And, of course, joining me, as always, the one, the only, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
I am great, Gary. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. If you guys have questions for Monty and you want them here right on the show, make sure to send an email to monty@gamebreaker.tv. All right, let's get right into it. This up first up this week. Justin Burkholz. This is Gary and Monty. Thanks for the awesome show. I really enjoy watching every week. I am working on a major in mathematics and a minor in statistics. Is there a place for me in the video game industry? Possibly in analytics. Keep up the great work, Justin Burkholz. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. And yes.
Yes.
Game companies love the analytics, don't they? They love it.
Yeah,
they love crunching numbers.
Let's talk analytics a little bit. So there's actually a bit of a divide of what's happening. So first off, analytics. Let me back up. Analytics is using the trends and the actual numbers behind what players do to figure out what's happening with your game, how it's monetizing, all of that sort of thing. So, it falls down to things that are like longitudinal tests, where you're looking at where did this player come from, how long did they play, how many times does somebody need to play before they pay, how many times does somebody need to pay before they become one of our better customers. There's lots of things with A/B testing, so how do I optimize my UI? Here I'm going to show, so many people this version, so many people that one, find out what's right and pull it out. So there's a lot of analytics out there. Now,
is that a more recent trend that it's gotten much more analytical about, like actually making decisions based on just purely factual numbers rather than just gut feel?
Yeah, so it's gone up and down, because I used to hate it a few years ago. There was a real, I'm going to say about 4 years ago, when Zynga first sort of came on the scene. They were machines at it. And, you'd get from Zynga, somebody would say, look, we release a game when it's 60% complete. We watch our users, and we build the rest of the 40%. So we're optimizing. People who complain about, I don't like the spoon-feeding tutorial and the big arrow pointing me to click here, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's been proven over and over again that if you want to get more people playing your game, you have to do it that way. The first 30 seconds, if they don't understand what's going on, they'll walk. There's too many free games out there. So I used to hate it. Let me tell you why I used to hate it, is what I saw there was an almost slavish devotion to these statistics. And in the way I talked about it is, if you see an aerial picture of a river and it's just kind of winding serpentine because it's taken the path of least resistance. At every foot of the river, it's gone where it was easier to flow. And that's kind of what, being absolutely focused on the analytics does, is it takes you that winding route. So you also have to have somebody who's a canal builder who says, oh, we want to go from here to here? Okay, let's dig it through. And so you've got these sort of dueling concepts in the market. And where people have sort of arrived at is, in terms of game design, analytics will help you find what's called the local maximum. So the best spot close to where you are, but not necessarily the best spot ever. Excuse me. They've also found that with A/B testing and studying marketing models and all of that, they're able to spend their money more wisely, build a better game, and make the players who are going to monetize happier. And that's part of, the whole rise of mid-core games was a lot of people realizing that, we've made these games really soft and easy, but the soft and easy players don't shell out as much as the core gamers do. So let's make a game that's a little harder, a little more real game kind of environment, and we're going to see higher returns. And, they're starting to see some of those things. That makes it better. So in all of that sort of space, lots of room for somebody with a math and statistics degree, absolutely. The big divide between sort of the two roles is there's a role for data scientists and there's a role for analysts. So the data scientists are the ones who are creating the deeper analysis, creating the tools that analysts use, and really trying to understand what's in the information. So a guy I used to work for, he had this line, he said, answers are easy, it's questions that are hard. Point being, if you know which question to ask, answering it becomes a lot easier and your results are a lot better. So the data scientists are really armed for that, what questions need to be asked side, and they do that sort of analysis. The analysts are more folks who are taking the tools that these data scientists have created, and they're going through the exercise of, okay, how do I apply it to the game I'm working on now? How do we optimize what we're most concerned about, whether it's game mechanics, advertising, monetization, session length, any of these sorts of things. And so these two groups work hand in hand, and there's a long and bright future in the analytics business.
Good news for Justin. All right, next up, this one from Skylar Bradsby. Skylar says, hey, Monty, my background is mainly in graphic design. I was looking into job postings and saw that UI designers require similar experiences relating to graphic design. Do you think showing mock-ups of games and UIs, maybe even an interactive UI in Flash, will impress the employer? Thank you, the Gamebreaker staff, for all you do. Thanks for watching, Skylar. So what do you think Skylar should do here?
Yeah, so yes, somebody has to draw the menus. They're not simple. They don't draw themselves, and a good design interface matters a lot. The Academy of Motion Arts and Pictures, they give an Oscar for the credits design, right? There is importance to those things. Now, but this brings up an interesting point that I'll dive into. So I was told today that I tend to go off wherever I feel like it when asked a question. I am going to use my liberty to do that. The
floor is yours, sir.
That's why they call it Monty's Minute.
There you
go. Where he says that, hey, look, I want to be in games, but I'm in graphic design. Lots of people, and this is really, when I look at tons of game design students right now, what people have to wrap their head around is, I might not be in the core sector I want to be in, or I might not be working for the genre of game I want to work for, but all relevant work I can do is going to get me to where I want to be. So, if you have somebody who's working for a game company, and for whatever reason, the game company is doing a pony game, and you're a hardcore FPS player, that's okay. You want to learn, you want to be in the business, you want to get credits, work on the pony game. I mean, I've played Star Dolls, I've played Club Penguin, I've played Belisara the pony game. It's what you've got to do. You take the work anywhere in the industry. Now, let's say you can't get your foot into a game company. You really need to think about things like, I paid a visit to a company called Dassault Systems. Their parent company are the guys who make the Mirage fighter jet in France. This is a huge company. They've got 401ks, they've got cafeterias, really nice place. They do lots of 3D modeling, they do lots of 3D art and virtual environments. Working for a place like that is a great option, and the more companies like that we see, it's great that, you know, if you're working for a game company and you can afford to crunch because you're single or you're newly married, that's great. But if you've got a baby, you shouldn't be crunching. And if you can roll to a job in an industry that takes the same skill sets, lets you keep developing, you know, that's a great thing. So people really need to look at these, you know, what I'm calling adjacent sectors. So there's things where UI design, lots of the graphic design stuff, some of the web stuff, but then you get into serious games, which is going to be a huge market. You get into, you know, we talked about it last week, some of the gamification stuff. Mm-hmm. All of these things are going to help you build valuable skills. So, you know, go for it.
All right, next up, this one from Arkish. Arkish says, "Hi, Monty. I'm a software engineer with a BS in computer science. I have over 15 years experience developing system-level software for the Windows operating system. Would an engineer with experience in kernel-level software security be of value to a gaming company?" Guy's got some serious skills. He says, "Obviously, security is an issue for any software, and even more so for gaming companies. But I also assumed that they outsourced most of the work and kept it away from their core business. Am I correct in this assumption?" So let's start first up with his background here. Kernel level software security,
which is really handy because, you know, if you look at the sorts of hacks that people use, there'll be the easiest thing is something sent on the wire in the clear. So you're not using HTTPS or you're not encrypting in any way what you're sending from the player's computer. A lot of games, a lot less now, but it used to be more. There's a lot of logic on the computer, so people would be hacking the computer or hacking memory locations so they can up stuff. And it actually, you know, this baffled me for a while. Was playing XCOM and love it, but I'd finish and they give you the stats of you versus the world, and I thought I played relatively well. I'm a conservative kind of player. I like to have overwhelming force before I go in to fight something, but people were scoring way off the scale compared to me. And so I started asking around, and it's like, yeah, some folks that are hacking it. And it's like, a single-player game like this, why would you bother hacking it? But, you know, game designers are looking for ways to lock more and more things down. And some of the third-party tools like Punkbuster and other things like that, they're good, but you end up in the environment with one hack against that tool opens up a whole bunch of games. So it's a hard thing, and you know, no slight on Punkbuster, it's a decent tool. It's a hard thing to be in. So, you know, that whole kernel level stuff, that's the most fundamental, you know, level of the OS. And if you can protect that, it makes it harder for people to hack. So I think that's great. People would. So
where does most of this work actually get done? Do they outsource a lot of this stuff, or do they do most of it in-house?
So outsourcing is an interesting thing. You know, if you listen to the hype, geez, I'm going to go back to late 90s, early 2000s. You know, we'd be surprised. In fact, people from then would be amazed that there were still jobs left in North America. You know, everything was going to get outsourced. And although I did hear a funny story of a guy who was he was a sysadmin, so he was doing, you know, scripts and things like that to keep servers running. He outsourced his job to China, paid them 20% of his salary, spent the day cruising Reddit, Facebook, and shopping. It's hilarious.
I think I'm going to do that right now. Can I outsource my job and just get somebody come right in, sit in the chair? I'm going to go back and play XCOM for a couple hours, you know. And
you got to believe me when I say I spent a good bit of time thinking, what parts of my job could I outsource?
What can I outsource? I'm going to start thinking about it. That's a good entrepreneurial way to think about your job.
It was genius. He won all these awards because his work was always on time. It was always well commented and all this stuff because somebody
He's
else
like 8 people working for him. He's got like a whole team. He's got like a whole force somewhere like working for him. That's hilarious.
It is. But anyway, so back to the point of outsourcing. So what do game companies outsource? So when you get down to sort of the studio level, so the development studio, so you'll have publishers and IP owners who will essentially outsource to a game development studio. But when you're at the game development studio, there's a lot more use of tools, so pre-built things that do stuff you want. So we talked about Overdriver a few shows back, who does back-end server software for mobile games. Really nice. You plug it in. You don't need to have a server program. Great. It's kind of an outsourcing thing. The next level you get into is most often art. And the art goes to countries and companies that the studio has a long-standing relationship with. So, hey, we've got an art director, and we've got some artists who are doing the main stuff, but I need 50 trees. I need 18 pieces of furniture. I need all this stuff done in this art style. And if I can send that somewhere else and do it cheaper, I'm going to do it. It's what makes it possible for me to build the game. I've seen a couple of sort of Tiger Team implementations of we're working, we're crunching, we just don't have enough horses. We're going to shell out, and a SWAT team's going to come in, and they're going to help us. They're going to, give us more hands on keyboards. They're going to work on stuff, that sort of stuff happening. A lot of stuff that we were told was going to happen of 24-hour development cycles. So, I work on the East Coast. When I'm done, I hand it off to somebody in the West Coast. When you're done, you hand it off to somebody in Asia. They hand off to Europe, and then it's back to me. Not really happening because it's hard to do. So the coordination efforts and all of those things are really hard. So coming back to his point on kernel-level security, that's not something I'd want to outsource. So I would buy a tool that does it, but you need to be really tight with my core game programmers to understand what they're doing, what hacks they're concerned about, what they're seeing to do the security right for my game. So, I don't think that's something that would be generally outsourced. Now, you might be able to sell yourself as a consultant who just goes in and does that part of the game. That's entirely possible, and that's kind of outsourcing, but not the sense we had in the late 90s.
All right, last up this week from Graham. Graham says, Dear Monty, what would be your advice for a UK student looking to intern in the US at a larger company as a developer, and be any tips to help his application?
So that's interesting. So internships are going to start to get harder and harder to find. I was doing the math. I was doing the math on the number of students that there are in just Massachusetts, and the number of game jobs, and I think it's relatively similar. If you look across the country. So in Massachusetts, there are about 2,000 people employed in game development, and there's about 2,000 students currently studying game development degrees, so art and programming and that sort of stuff. That doesn't count the, I'm going to guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000 comp sci students that are out there, and probably a few thousand more who are just studying art that, are potential people to roll into the industry. So when you look at that and you say, oh, wow, so we have multiple times the number of employees in school right now. So on the good side, hey, a lot of the talent crunch and that sort of stuff, where the industry is going to adapt and grow, and that's great. On the negative side, there's going to be a ton of people looking for every internship opportunity out there, and it's going to be a very competitive market in the next, 3-4 years. There's real issues in the market, and you'll hear employers complaining about recent graduates don't have enough experience in some of the fundamentals of commercial programming or managing large art pipelines and things like that. So now that I've depressed Graham, let's talk about, all right, so what tactics can you use? One is to look at excuse me, Look at U.S. companies who have offices in the UK. So Rockstar, EA's got multiple studios there. Look at some of those guys and do something for them first, and talk to the people there and say, hey, look, it's my dream to move to California. Could you hook me up with somebody there? That'd be one thing. The other thing is really focus your application, really get engaged in things. So I know locally, Turbine, Warner Brothers, they had a bunch of internships that they opened up, QA and other things. If you are interested in internships, particularly in the Massachusetts area, follow us on Twitter. It's mass_digi. So whenever we see internships, we post them up there. But when you're going into sort of a targeted company, like you've always wanted to work for Riot or Tryon, focus your portfolio, focus what you do at that company. And that means if you're into art, draw stuff in their art style, put things together that work that way. If you wanted it, if you're looking at starting in QA, which is a very reasonable place to start and reasonable place to intern, get on their forums, find bugs, report their bugs, play their betas of upcoming releases, all of that sort of stuff, and make a name for yourself. So QA jobs and internships are pulled from the bug hunters of various games. So, you have to get out and do that stuff. There isn't anything magical you can put in your application. And in fact, the biggest problem for students is they're kind of like vanilla pudding. It's nice, but it all tastes the same. You can get vanilla pudding anywhere, and it's vanilla pudding. Well, I see student applications, and it's like, okay, so you've got a degree. That's nice. You've got a decent grade point average. Okay. Now I know absolutely nothing else about you. And so, in the kinds of things we do, I've written a half dozen reference letters in the last week or two, because these were students I came in contact with at events. They were in our summer program. They were at our game challenge. They did other things that, helped me understand that this is a good student, a distinguished student, and now I could actually write a useful reference to them. Otherwise, even if you're a good student, but you got that vanilla pudding kind of thing, your references are going to the same thing as somebody else's references. So, hey, he's good. He works hard. He's, good personality.
Got to sell. You got to sell yourself, and that's, I think, a lot of students coming out of college, they don't really necessarily teach. They teach you how to write a resume. A lot of times that's even wrong, I find, but it's like, especially for the industry related to, like a lot of industries have sort of different types of resumes that aren't very conventional. Like television is completely unconventional. But going back to what you said before about companies, I'm actually still amazed at some of the companies, how many people they hire from their community. Riot's one of them. Riot has hired so many people out of their community. It's unbelievable. And if you're in there and you're vocal and you're good and you stand out, they hired so many people from the community, and everybody's super. It's an awesome place over there, because there's so many of the people who work there are just super hardcore gamers because they were fans. But yeah, sell yourself. Pick up some books on actually just selling yourself and how to kind of like, I think what you said, like rewriting your resume, and really sometimes you got to remove yourself from your resume. I meet a lot of people, especially even people who like trying to come into Gamebreaker, and a lot of times people are too timid, I think, about even really just trying to sell themselves. And it's like, well, when you've got multiple people hitting you every day for this position, I need something that's going to make you stand out. And like you said, just the standard, like, hey, this is where I went to school and this is what I did. I've got 20 of those sitting on my desk that say the same thing. You got to give me something else. I'm always looking for like that one little thing that stands out. So sell.
It ends up being, remember last summer when we were doing selection for the summer program, one student wrote something about, hey, I did this AI project. Oh, okay. One of the things that, was going to get worked on had some AI issues related to it. Great, we'll pull them in on that. But otherwise, there were a whole bunch of them we had no idea. So, and for the students who didn't get in last summer, it wasn't because of anything you did. We didn't have any way of distinguishing a bunch of people.
Last up this week from Jesse Joy. Let's do one more. Jesse says, do you think we'll ever see a fully hackable environment where the game and all its mechanics come from player-generated content, and where hacking the code and adding new things the game is encouraged by the player base? You guys are a credit to the industry. Thank you. Well, thank you, sir. What do you think? Totally hacking and modding?
Yeah.
That's got to be a slippery slope of just disaster of code.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of open source stuff, that happened in, when they put the Quake engine out, open source, even, a lot of the Linux ports and things like that of games are these open source, here's everything environments. And so you'll see, not only you will see, there are things like that out there. There's a movement afoot when games are abandoned to, hey, turn them over to Creative Commons, let people do stuff on. The problem with it, and I don't think it'll ever be mainstream, I don't expect to spend any time playing those sorts of games because they're a mess.
They're not going to be very good.
A bunch of different people doing things right in different ways. There isn't any way to analyze what's happening. All that stuff is different. So really what you end up with is an environment that you can muck around with, and you can test some ideas out. But to get a bunch of people to play it and to turn it into something stable, we may see one or two of those, in the next decade, but there'll be rare things that happens. I mean, if you look at Unity, includes a bunch of sort of base, demo games in their package. And so you can take it, and they've got an FPS environment, they've got a few other environments. That's kind of good. It's wide open. All sorts of people can work on it. It's a relatively standard technical environment so that you can bring these pieces together. You might be able to do something interesting, but
it almost sounds like it almost sounds like this would be like something. I go back to talking about you getting people into groups. It sounds like it would be a great idea for like a small strike force team of like maybe you just want to geek out with your gamer programmer buddies and stuff like that, and maybe like 6 or 8 of you all do something like this as an experiment of just exploration, like that kind of.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think on the flip side of other games or companies coming up with more sandbox-esque tools? Like I'm thinking of like a Second Life. Do you think we haven't really seen? I mean, Second Life is absolutely huge and it was very popular, but we haven't really seen. I mean, we have Minecraft. I'm trying to think of like other things like that. But do you think we'll see anything else like that kind of progress? Is there a real model there with another Second Life-esque game?
Yeah, so it won't be a Second Life game, but there will be another open environment that people embrace and develop things in. I think, without a doubt, we're going to see things like that. I think, out of Kickstarter, you might see some crowdsourced games, and you and I talked about this once. Hey, what if we took a game and sort of opened it up to the Gamebreaker community and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And this is kind of the way good open source projects run. So, you might think open source is wide open, everybody's doing whatever they want. That's true, but the main branch of the code, there's usually this core group of people who are pushing it through, they're getting releases done. So, okay, these things are going into the release, that stuff doesn't work, and pushing it through to make it happen. So you might see some things like that evolve over time that, hey, here's what we're trying to build. Everybody come and chip in. Again, part of the problem, though, is you have this great grand idea, and at the start of any game development cycle, there's tons of genius ideas. Then you start writing the code. Then you start building the art assets. And then you start saying, okay, we don't have enough time to do that. We can't do that. This doesn't fit with that. And you start cutting it back. And so if there are people involved who aren't actually coding or developing art, they can get frustrated, they can get bored. It's an effort to keep them engaged. But I think there's a lot of room to innovate there, and I think we'll see something eventually.
Monty Sharma, always a pleasure. If you guys have questions for Monty, make sure to send them over to Monty at Gamebreaker TV, and you can follow Mr. Monty Sharma on the Twitter at Monster, MONTSTER27. It's on Twitter. Always a pleasure, sir. Rocking and rolling. getting people moving up the industry food chain of the video game industry there. So we'll be back next week with another Monty's Minute. Keep it locked and dialed in right here to Gamebreaker.tv, and we'll see you all next week for more Monty's Minute. Have a great week, everybody.